Welcome to In the Kitchen. Today we're cooking up some Peruvian style baked wings. Great for game day, it's crispy, it's tender. You could fool anyone to think these are fried. This is really a gift to your future self because how we're cooking them is the secret of it. It starts with dry brining. To prep the chicken for the dry brining process, essentially all you want to do is take them out of the bag and into a bowl. Wash your hands like a good chef would do to not cross-contaminate, and you'll be adding in some of that diamond crystal goodness. That's my go-to. You just want to add salt to all of the chicken, and I add a 1-to-1 ratio. So 1 pound of chicken, 1 tablespoon of salt. I sometimes am a little generous because I'm feeling that way. Lather up all of your chicken with that salt. You could do the same process for any sort of meat. You can also make your life a little bit easier if you took a bigger bowl. Alas, I did not do so I have to get all up in there. From there, I just organize them nicely on a wired rack. That's really helpful because it allowed the air dry to happen better in the fridge. At this point, all you want to do is put it at that bottom rack of your fridge and leave it there for a few hours, or in my case, about 24. Bottom row is important for the avoidance of cross-contamination. Dry brining is basically a gift to your future self. The concept of dry brining is very, very straightforward. What you're doing is creating a salty exterior on the meat by adding kosher salt to the surface of it. By adding that salt to the exterior, you're creating 2 different salt concentrations in the meat, the exterior being more salty and the interior being less so. Over time, osmosis is going to happen as a result of that. So the juices from the inside are going to migrate towards the area of higher salt concentration, aka the outside, and over time, you're going to create essentially a brine at the top layer of the meat, because now you have the salt mixing in with the meat juice. A star is born, but a brine is born. You know what I mean? Anyways, if you give it even more time, that surface brine is going to get reintroduced back into the meat. So that process is called diffusion, kind of like the opposite. And that's going to introduce salt inside the meat. The salt is going to help denature the meat proteins, which actually is creating a matrix that traps water moisture. And that's important because as you're cooking it, rather than the water expelling out and getting this drier meat on the inside, you're actually retaining more water. And you've also made the skin a lot more dry along the way. That's why you're able to unlock both the crispy outside and the tender inside when cooking. The other 2 important ingredients to dry brining is 1, the refrigerator, and putting it on a mesh-lined baking tray, and 2, time. Some cuts of meat that are bigger, you can dry brine for up to 3 days, for example. In my case, these were small wings, and I just went for about 23 hours, but there's some flexibility there. I've also written extensively about this in my Substack, and Serious Eats has an awesome article outlining it. It's been just about 23 hours, and you can already see how the chicken looks different. It's somewhat more dried out in a good way. We know now that the dry brining is totally working. I promise you it is. At this point, I've realized I did not butcher my chicken on day 1, so I decided to butcher it myself. I like them separately. You could totally cook it whole. There's nothing wrong with that. You really just want to follow along that bone and feel for where it separates. It's easier when you flip the bird around and feel for where the bone sort of meets the next one and cut right there. That's going to separate out the drum from the wing, and that's what we're looking to do. And then cut off that wing tip. I personally like to save my wing tips for a stock, for example, so I'll put them in a bag, label it, and throw it in the freezer. And wash my hands, because I want to start working on the marinade now. But before that, I realized I forgot yet another thing, which is foil. Foil can be really helpful to make sure all that chicken juice doesn't get sticky. At this point, we're prepping the marinade. It's like a handful of ingredients. It's so easy. I start off with some lime, and what I've learned the hard way after squeezing many of limes for pop-ups, this is a tip my mom taught me, is that rolling them makes your life a lot easier. So I roll my limes up, it's my stress relief, and then I squeeze them in and add in yellow mustard. This is where things get Peruvian. Yellow mustard is a staple of my home. It's a staple of like pretty much all of Peruvian bases for the marinade. Clearly I don't measure very much or touch mustard with my hands because there I am mushing it on the side, but I did about 1.5 tablespoons. I'm then gonna add in some garlic, which I've decided to microplane. Microplaning is an awesome technique and it's really easy to have and handy in your kitchen. I really recommend it. You could use that for zesting, for example, or Parmesan cheese. In this case, I'm going to use it for garlic, and it gets it really, really fine, which allows it to cover all of the chicken in its entirety. In place of it, you could mince it, you could dice it, whatever you want to do to your garlic. At this point, I add in some spices. My go-to when it comes to anything Peruvian is the holy duo of paprika and cumin. Paprika, I went in with 1 teaspoon, and the cumin, also 1 teaspoon, so a 1-to-1 ratio. This does lean heavy on the cumin, so if you're not into that, take it out. For me, cumin is a core part of my Mediterranean roots, so maybe this recipe is a touch Peruvian and a touch Mediterranean. Ain't no wrong spice you can add in at this point. I add in about, I would say, 1/4 cup of canola oil, a touch of salt. The chicken's already well salted, so no need to add a lot. Whisk it all up with this little baby whisk. What's really awesome about this marinade, you'll notice that it's kind of all cohesive. That's because we added in the mustard, and the mustard is emulsifying or binding it all together. So I add in a bit more canola oil to get the desired texture that I want. There's no right or wrong here. I just want it to be somewhat runny and easy to work with, and then I taste it. I taste everything along the way. My grandma actually tastes the chicken after she's put it on, but I don't really have the courage to lick a raw chicken. I'll use a rubber spatula, which is yet another handy tool to have in your arsenal. At this point, I'm just lathering up the chicken and making sure it gets through all the nooks and crannies. And then line up your chicken across that wired mesh rack. That's kind of it. That's all you have to do before it goes inside the oven. I like having it face up so that bigger surface area is exposed. And then I put it in the middle rack. I'll put it in for 20 minutes to start at around 450. So it's been around 20 minutes now, and the oil is a bit jumpy. That can be a bit intimidating, but it's okay, just be careful around it. This is my first flip. So I flip them over to put the skin side down and then put it back inside the oven for yet another 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, I'll take them out. Damn, they're already starting to look so good. One more flip to re-expose the skin side, and we're going to put it in for one last cooking time of around 5 to 10 minutes. But really, at this point, you've got some leeway because you've invested in that dry brining, which is going to help keep them really tender on the inside, even if you do slightly overcook them, and crispy on the outside. Sayonara, and see you soon. My mouth, I think, was watering if I had to play that back. These wings are so crispy and they're just an absolute delight. We let them rest for a few minutes, which is something I'd recommend as well to keep the meat extra tender and the juices from flowing out too fast. But at that point, I would serve them relatively immediately. These wings are delicious on their own, and it's the way I grew up eating the Peruvian style wing, but you can always complement it with a tasty sauce. My head's going to maybe some sort of cilantro-based ranch or something just more acidic to complement it. In my case, I chose to serve it up with a delicious slaw, and that's me eating it. I'm happy, they're so tender, they're really flavorful, and just have this home-cooked meal, crispiness, and absolute delight. I know you'll enjoy them too. Let me know if you make them.